ranking all 10 guilds in Commander based on how fun they are.
I'm Mia, and I like baking at 2 a.m.
I'm BZ. You could probably guess what my favorite guild is. We're the Nitpicking Nerds, sponsored by Card Kingdom. Card Kingdom is a website. If you usually skip this part of the video, you can go right over there right now and see a unique landing page that shows you our top picks, our cards that we'd recommend buying, and then of course you're already on the site. You can just buy them.
It has us on it. Isn't that awesome?
Aren't we awesome?
We're also sponsored by Moxfield. You're a liar. It's going to be somewhere in the video. You can't guess where it is. You know the drill.
And Dragon Shield, best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
We're shaking it up today, and you can shake it up by buying sleeves for your cube, for your deck, for your draft lands, and your draft pool on Dragon Shield. They got really, really good sleeves. Did you know that?
And we're sponsored by ourselves, Patreon, and you guys. Thank you for so much for going to our Patreon. You can check out a podcast that we do. We also do deck audits, and we have some gameplay and a little bit else up there. So go check it out. It really helps out the channel.
Many, many hours of exclusive content on there that you cannot find on YouTube, so we would appreciate that. But this is the guild ranking. We've never really ranked the guilds in like a longer video. So we're going to talk about like from least fun to most fun. We're going to go through every single guild, and we're going to give some of our examples of like our favorite commanders, our least favorite commanders, and things we like and dislike about the guilds.
BZ and I both have strong opinions on each of the guilds because we have been playing Magic for a hot minute. There are 10 guilds total.
Yeah, if you're not familiar, there's Azorius, Dimir, Rakdos, Gruul, Celestia, Orzhov, Golgari, Izzet, Simic, and Boros. Those are the 10, and we're going to be going through them, and starting with number 10, which of course is the least fun guild. This one for me, it's pretty easy. Dimir. Bottom, dead last. Sorry, Dimir. There's a lot of problems with Dimir. It's not that Dimir's not cool and can't do cool stuff, but very rarely have I seen Dimir do cool stuff.
Yeah, I think Dimir can do cool stuff, but the average Dimir deck is not the coolest deck at the table. We really like Mill and Surveil. We're really happy that the Surveil lands came out and all that stuff. And just Mill in general is a pretty wacky thing in Commander because it's never the top tier strategy at the table.
Mill's cool, but like, what is Dimir's color identity? This is my big problem. What does Dimir do? It's not like, you know how we'll flash forward, like Rakdos is the sacrifice color. Like, what is Dimir? It's like the draw cards, kill your stuff. It really feels like blue and black just mashed together. Blue and black don't have like a brand new identity when you make Dimir. It's really kind of stinky to me. It has zombies, it has wraiths, it has horrors. Those are cool creature types. I think ninjas, kind of not super enjoyable. Still cool.
Yeah, I definitely think that ninjas give Dimir a bad name overall because of our most hated commander, at least. But I feel also like Dimir decks play very similarly. They don't have much of a cohesive base of what the guild is trying to do, but I feel like they always run the same staples, and it always feels very similar.
Yeah, it is tough for me to build a Dimir deck without just kind of getting bored and just looking at it eventually when I have 75 cards in the list and I go, I don't like this. I've done that with at least 3 or 4 Dimir decks now, and I only have one that has ever even made it past the draft on moxfield.com. But this is just like a color combination that I'm not a fan of. I just can't get it to work. I can't do it. Even, you know, a lot of people I think will say that like there's a blue-black reanimator strategy. But that deck is just a bunch of blue counter spells mashed together with a bunch of mono-black reanimator spells. It doesn't feel like Dimir.
It doesn't feel like anything distinct. And there are just, as I mentioned, a ton of staples in these colors. And I think that just proves it with your Dimir deck. You have one, you cranked it up to the max power, it's Oscar. And it has a bunch of the staples, and it's higher power, but I feel like if you try and go lower, the decks kind of fall apart.
Yeah, clearly we don't like Dimir, but let's go to the most fun Dimir commanders, because there's still some cool stuff in here. What's your most fun?
My favorite was the deck that I had for a while. It was John Arenicus Shattered one. Long story short, you want to play a bunch of bad creatures and then give them to your opponents, and I think that's a very wacky and fun way to play Dimir.
And at least that deck had, now that I'm thinking about it, it had mono black creatures that sucked, mono blue creatures that sucked, and then John Arenicus was the gold card, like tying them all together. My favorite is Mirko, Obsessive Theorist. He's the one that cares about surveilling, and he gets bigger, and then he reanimates. So that is kind of like a reanimator commander, and it felt cool because it tied in Surveil, and Surveil is a mechanic I like a lot.
I think that Mirko is super cool, and I'm really happy to see it in a precon, something that's just like viable and fun and brings Dimir to a good light. I feel most of the time Dimir is okay because it's paired with a third color for the most part.
It like hides out in a shard or a wedge.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's always the least used guild in those because it's just like, oh, do I want to put Toxic Deluge and Cyclonic Rift in my deck? Not really. It's kind of this is a deck with a theme. Okay, so there's obviously we got to go to least fun commanders now, and there's a lot of competition, so you might not be able to guess what we're gonna pick. How about you do yours?
I don't like Yuriko. I feel like all of these decks literally run the same. I've come across maybe one unique Yuriko deck in my time that I've been playing Magic, and that's just because the person who was playing it was just trying to get random 8-drops off the top that they couldn't really cast in their hand. But still, that's the whole same thing. It's like, all right, kill the small creatures, get the big things, put the big stuff on top. I think it just gives a bad name to Dimir overall.
It just stinks. So basically, the only problem with Yuriko is that the Commander Ninjutsu is not taxed, so that does make it kind of not fun. Mine is Toxrill. Holy crap, this card is not enjoyable. It can definitely bog down a game when it just is played or reanimated and part of the 99, but as your commander, I've played against this deck a few times, and one of the times they just went like Mana Vault, Mana Crypt, Swamp, Pass, and we were like, who wants to just play the next game? Because I'm not ready for a turn through Toxrill. I'm not, I promise.
It's miserable. It doesn't feel good, and it's so much value overall. You get to draw the cards. Your opponents can't keep stuff on the board. It's just not fun as a commander.
Kind of slows the game down. So overall, Dimir doesn't leave the best taste in our mouths. That's why it's number 10. How about number 9?
Number 9 is Simic here. There's a lot of value to be had with Simic decks, whether you want card draw or landfall or ramping or counter spells and interaction. There's a lot you can do with this. But it also seems like it just has so much value that it's like playing it on easy mode.
And also, I think this suffers the exact same problem as Dimir. What does Simic do? Name a draft format where Simic was good, or name a draft format where Simic was a synergy deck. Simic is never gets synergy cards. It always gets lands and like generic ramp and like big creatures, I guess. Even in Modern Horizons 3 coming up, the theme of Simic is just like Eldrazi. Sure, I don't know. It's just, it never feels like it has a great identity. It always feels like blue cards mashed together with green cards, which leads to this good stuffy feel of like, I'm going to play Exploration and then I'm going to play Cyclonic Rift, or I'm going to play, I don't know, some kind of blue thing. Name a blue card.
I was going to say like Force of Will.
Heuristic Study, Force of Will, sure, those.
Yeah, I feel like Simic decks overall, it's just like they get away with a lot because landfall, their identity is usually Simic, and it's not like you can destroy lands. Not that I'm advocating for that. However, as we mentioned in a video previously, landfall isn't really taxed or hurt as much as the rest of the strategies. So with the Simic decks, it's just you power it out real fast, and no one really bullies them enough in the beginning, I'd say.
I literally wrote on the script, I just put, players don't bully Simic players enough in the early game. This is when they're vulnerable, before they do their little rampy ramps into 8-drops, like hoo-hoo, tee-hee. It's like, how could we have stopped them? It's like, well, probably by bullying them in the early game, which isn't the best play pattern, but that is how some Simic decks need to go.
Yeah, powering out your game plan fast is like Timmy energy, which we do like in certain times, but with all the blue staples that we're just not fans of seeing in every single deck, that if you're going mid to high, it's always like the Cycros, the Heuristic Studies, you know what I mean.
I mean, let's not get it too twisted here, because we're still pretty early in the list. We're not just going to complain about blue staples in every blue, like, color pair or whatever. Obviously, you can play Cyclonic Rift in anything, but the Simic decks, since there's no direction, they tend to play these cards more, I feel like. So it's not like, oh, Cyclonic Rift is somehow a Simic card. I see it way more in Dimir and Simic for some reason.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But moving on to some commanders we find really fun, I think Emoti, Celebrant of Bounty, is my favorite Simic commander. It's just really fun to cascade stuff off the top. It gives a bunch of stuff cascade, and it brings that Timmy energy, but in a way that's a little bit more fun and random, I'd say.
It definitely does the Simic thing of like ramp, 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 big thing, big thing, big thing. But I do like the random element. I think Emoti's a pretty cool card. I also the Goose Mother. Goose Mother is just nonsense. It's like foods and counters, and it's kind of big, and it honks.
Yeah, but moving on to least fun, I think my pick for this is Kinnan. It's just so easy to just go too hard with Kinnan, right? I've never seen a casual Kinnan deck.
Even if they play a turn 1 Birds of Paradise, turn 2 Kinnan, they already have 2 more mana to spend, and it's turn 2, and you're just like, it's only going to get worse from here, because they could also follow it up with some kind of like Arcane Signet, and then tap that for 2 mana, and then tap that for something, and it's just like, whoa.
It spirals.
Like, please, can you just give me a second to like catch my breath, please? Because, I mean, of course, the Kinnan deck would just be all of those cards, because if I built Kinnan, I'd want to put cards that synergize with him, so you can have explosive starts even without Soul Rings with Kinnan.
Yeah, it's just the value of like, hey, instead like you like playing stuff. Why don't you play more stuff? That's the no real identity of Simic that I think we were really talking about.
Yeah, I really don't like AC. That's probably my pick for least fun. It just sort of spirals out of control, and the non-stop ramping. This is one of those decks where you can basically just put all ramp in the deck because ramp is now also card draw, and then if AC dies, you can recast it next turn and start the chain over and over. And it doesn't say play a land, it just says land entering, so you can play a fetch land, draw a card, crack it, land, draw a card, extra land for turn. It's a fetch land, draw a card. Leads to a lot of sit here, do nothing turns, leads to a lot of just unstoppable, it feels like every card in that deck is growth spiral sometimes.
Yeah, it seems like just wait here till I win real quick.
Yeah, just hold up. I'm going to annihilate you. Number 8 is another green guild. This one I feel like it does one thing, and I don't know what to do for the second thing. I don't know how to find another thing that this does. It's Celestia, the green-white. Obviously, you think of tokens first. They make tokens all day, every day, but even in the token decks, I feel like there's not that many good token cards. So the token decks look kind of samey. They are cool. It is a thing you can do. It's like definitely a core identity. So when we say that Dimir and Simic are confused, Celestia very much not confused. But I'm left feeling like I just don't have oomph from Celestia.
I wish that they stapled more populate onto things. I love the squad mechanics. That was a really awesome way to make cool tokens. Populate should be on more things, and I think it would give Celestia a little bit more of an identity. And I think that it would just give Celestia a little bit more power, and you would just get a board of creatures that are actually powerful instead of little 1/1s. Ooh, you made a 2/2. That's super cool.
Yeah, I mean, Celestia is the classic make a bunch of tokens and then pump them up and attack you for 50. Totally fair magic. They can definitely flood the board the easiest of any guild, really. They also have enchantments. There's a lot of like auras, and like Enchantress is definitely core green-white. So I guess when I said it only does tokens, it's like 75% tokens, 20% auras, and 5%. I don't know.
I think the enchantment tokens are really cool, like the rolls and such. However, I feel like with enchantment decks, it's like, okay, play an enchantment, draw a card, play an enchantment, draw a card.
And then how much of those decks are similar to the other
So
decks?
I find Celestia in general to be like, commanders are a little boring. I think that's also just because I see so much Sithis in general.
My problem is that the Celestia commanders, not like the most popular ones are boring, but just when I read a Celestia commander on average, it's just not that interesting. They don't really seem to spice them up, and there's some color combinations that have some completely out there stuff. Even Dimir has some complete wacky cards. But Celestia feels like they're all kind of chilling in the same sort of space, and they don't feel too special.
It feels like very stay in your lane. I think there's been a couple cooler ones that have come out, like Yenna recently and that sort. But I do think that a lot of them do feel very samey.
How about our most fun? I'm going to pick Tristani, Celestia's voice, the original Tristani. I love the fact that they took tokens, but they sort of twisted it a little bit. And now you want really big tokens or a lot of tokens because you're gaining life. And then you can put a bunch of life gain payoffs or ways to pay life. It's really cool. There's some like nice combos. You mentioned populate. So like all the squad creatures or like a Phyrexian processor, that kind of thing.
I liked your Trustani deck. It was cool, and the only problem was that you really had a hard time closing out the game. He'd sit there at like 100, 500 life.
That was on me. That's my fault. Celestia has a million ways to close out games. But the problem with that deck, though, is I had to make it on a budget because I knew that if I didn't make a budget Tristani deck, I wouldn't like it.
I think my most fun is Kadir, a caller of the small. I think the rabbits are super cute, and I think this is like the quintessential make a bunch of tokens and that sort, but this just like encourages other tokens too. So if you have some treasures, you also profit off that. It's not just the 1/1s.
Yeah, you could go like diverse with it. And I actually forgot to write down my least fun Celestia commander, so I'm just going to read you what is written here next to least fun. It just says, I hate Sithis.
I hate Sithis. I'm sick of seeing Sithis decks. I don't think Celestia would be so low on my list if I have it. If Sithis wasn't the highest Celestia commander by like a good margin, I'd say.
I know, and I think it's because the rest of them feel a little samey or a little vanilla. Like they're not really, there's not enough oomph for me to want to go, oh, I could take this card with this, this, and this and build a deck. But Sithis is like the go-to, very pushed Enchantress commander, so it's the most popular. I don't really enjoy it too much, at least in terms of how fun it is. I will play against anything. I don't have a problem. I'm not going to tell you can't play it. I'm just not going to enjoy it as much as some other commanders.
Sithis is good, and that's why it's such a high margin above every other deck. However, that doesn't mean it's fun.
It does not mean it's fun. How about number 7?
Number 7, it's Boros, home of the Voltron, as I put on the script. And I think it's best for a bit of like the offbeat commanders. So these are, your commanders that you want to swing for 21. These are your aura and enchantment types. These are I think there's like always a little bit kind of weird commanders in this, like the Tai Joaquins that just came out. And then there's like Fire Song and Sunspeaker. We're getting into a little bit more interesting now, in my opinion.
And don't forget equipment. That's a huge Boros thing. Boros, I think, does have offbeat commanders. I think how I would do it is I would split Boros commanders 50%. 50% of them are literal garbage, chaff that you should never look at. And then 50% of them, mostly the recent ones, because Wizards realized that the first half was garbage, is like, whoa. That's like, I've never even seen that text on a card before, and it's a legendary. So I get to do like some sort of like really cool stuff with it. They've been a lot better lately about Boros card draw. Boros was a color combination that 10 years ago, there wasn't Boros card draw. That wasn't even a thing. People were like, Boros sucks. I can't win games because I can't do anything. I have equipments, and that's about it. I can't ramp. I can't draw cards. But now that it can do those things more, white can at least. Red's still kind of crummy. Then it's I think risen up above the other 3.
Boros is like good old-fashioned Magic, in my opinion. It's like extra combats. You're winning through combat damage for the most part. But red is not good, and white is not the best at the table. So I feel like these decks take a lot of work to make them shine, and they're never really the best ones at the table.
Yeah, you probably aren't playing the strongest decks at the table if you're playing like a Boros deck. So that could be one thing that hurts you. Some of the Sultai guilds, I was like, what's the word? Some of the Sultai guilds will probably wipe the floor with you if you're just playing like one-on-one. So you might have to use a little bit of politics or some special cards you put in your deck.
I think you do need to get a little bit like innovative with the Boros commanders. And red-white artifacts is a pretty cool archetype. You don't usually see that, but when you can make it shine, I think it's memorable.
It was super cool when it came together in Strixhaven, and it gave a whole new identity and a new thing for Boros to do, because most of the commanders before then just said attack, and now we've got a bunch of stuff that has other routes for Boros, or they even say you can attack, but I have the weirdest text box ever, like a Feather the Redeem, perhaps.
Yeah. I think Feather is cool, and I did vote it as my most fun, but it also does exemplify the most pressing of Boros's like negatives for me, which is that they often rely on their commanders surviving to actually get their deck to work, which is a little bit rough at times, because usually if you can target the Boros commander, you can usually take them out of the game.
My favorite is Osgir. This was probably telegraphed a little bit, but I love what he did. I love that he's like, okay, Boros decks, use the graveyard, discard cards, mill cards somehow, take advantage of artifacts, and it's just a totally new feel. It totally like revitalized the entire guild for me, as this was like the starting point. I will go to my least fun, which I think is funny, because I put Feather. I don't think Feather is enjoyable. It does play a lot of wonky cards, and that's cool for deck building, but the Feather deck, Feather will never die, and they will always have combat tricks, and you know they have combat tricks, and you kind of feel helpless a lot of the time.
I think Feather is like one of the only places to play combat tricks, which is why I picked it as my number 1, and I think that's like very funny. I think my least fun is Winota. I've seen this in CEDH, I've seen this on a budget, and both times it plays almost exactly the same of, if you don't kill Winota, you're gonna die.
It kind of dominates. I would have picked Winota if we were allowed to overlap, but we're going to pick 2 unique commanders each time, so I picked Feather. Number 6, we're moving up. We're in the right below the halfway point, and this is Azorius. Now, the first thing that you should know about the Azorius is they're cops. Azorius players love to just ruin your fun. I think the first thing everyone probably thinks of with Azorius is blue-white stacks, counter spells, board wipes. This is where white and blue, they come together, and they say, we could ruin your whole life.
No fun allowed, and this can really slow the game down. These are the decks where you're usually seeing Approach of the Second Sun as your win con.
Because you couldn't think of anything else to do, because your deck doesn't do anything except, stall the game out. That's like the bad side of blue-white. I think blue-white also has a very fun and enjoyable side. And I think realistically, we all know the blue-white stacks deck or the blue-white, no fun deck, but it's not as real as people make it seem. Players tend to go, that deck seems interesting. And then they build it on Moxfield.com, the best way to build decks online. And they look at it and they're like, oh, maybe my friends wouldn't like this. And then most of those decks stay on the shelf.
I think it gets rule zeroed out in your head before it ever gets on paper. So I completely agree with that. But Blue-white does have some archetypes, as we mentioned earlier. There's like flyers, which, Magic Arena did tell me was Blue's most prominent feature.
Thanks, Arena.
Blink, which, you always think of the Yorions and that
Flickering.
sort.
There's so many flicker commanders in blue.
And then, like, the Millicents, the Spirits deck. I think that's a pretty solid home for them. And these are not cops.
There's some decent things to do that don't involve you being a cop while playing Azorius. It also has some really weird one-off wacky decks. Celestia, take notes, but like Will, Scion of Peace, blue-white life gain, that's not a thing I've really seen before. Zethi, the multi-kicker instant matters card, and Bruna taking all of your auras and equipments and just throwing it on her on a blue card. Super cool. I love those. I love that Azorius. I've seen a lot of Azorius commanders and gone, wow, that would be an interesting deck. I can't say the same thing as much for the guilds below it.
I like how you're like, wow, that would be an interesting deck, and then build one just specifically about like annoying your opponents instead.
Look, it's a cool deck, all right? Dragon Lord Roach Die is cool. I will not hear any further rebuttals to this. How about the next bullet point?
Flickering stuff is cool. I do like getting multiple ETBs. I mean, I do play Yarok and that sort, so that should be pretty obvious. But just getting spells multiple times and getting ETBs multiple times, or leaving the battlefield triggers too. I think that's really cool, and this is like a really good home for them in the guilds, at least.
My favorite Azorius commander is Wrath Weatherlight Stalwart. I like that he cares about making tokens, which is white, lets you cast instant sorceries, which is blue, and then draws cards, which is blue, but he has another white ability when you can pay mana to pump your team. So it's just like a perfect blend of these colors, and it is seamless, and you're like, oh, I know exactly what to do with it. I want to play Raise the Alarm and then cast something else and then draw a card. It gets the wheels turning in your head just from reading it.
Wrath is a very cool, and I was always surprised that you didn't build that because you do talk about it a lot.
I have a deck that's way too similar, so I know I would not get enough enjoyment out of both of them, so I picked Balmor, and Wrath is just cool. I just like Wrath.
My favorite Azorius commander is Zethi, Arcane Blade Master, also known as Chun-Li in the Secret Lair. We saw a poison version of this where you just copy poison spells, and that was really cool, but you can build this in basically whatever way you want and then get kick counters on them, and I think that's a very original way to take this.
Totally wild. Least fun, you were probably thinking it, Grand Arbiter Augustin IV. That was our joint decision, and then we also picked a second one. Grand Arbiter just makes it so that you can't play Magic, and the person who has it can play slightly more Magic, and usually you see a bunch of stacks pieces with this card. Tell me there's a Grand Arbiter deck out there that doesn't play stacks pieces.
I mean, this is the OG No Fun Allowed deck, right?
Pretty much.
I feel like that's one of the first things you learn when you get into Commander. Lavinia, Azorius Renegade is mine. I feel like this really shuts off a lot of the decks that ramp via artifacts, and that is a fair amount of non-green strategies, I'd say.
It also could just punish you for missing land drops. I say, oh, I have a 2-lander, but I've got some Mana Dorks, or I've got a 2-lander, but I've got a Signet. It's like, nope, can't play your 4-mana spells still. Thanks, Lavinia. We don't like you. But we do like Moxfield.com, and you're probably thinking that there was a Moxfield ad, many other places in this video, but you were wrong. It's actually right here. We love Moxfield. They're a great way to build decks. It's a great way to see about these guilds. You can compare decks of various guilds and go, which one tickles my fancy.
If you want to check out our decks, they are also on there, and we update them every single time we switch a card in and out, basically in real time. So if you go and follow us there, you can see when we update our decks.
We're trying to get to 10,000. We're really close, so if you want to do your part, head over there and follow us real quick. But okay, top 5 now. We've got 5 guilds left. Hope you've been keeping track at home. We're not going to review them for you. Number 5 is Orzhov, the Black-White Guild. They are little tiny creatures, and then those creatures will meet untimely ends, and then you will profit off of that. That's pretty much Orzhov.
It's value. It's value when they enter, it's value when they leave, and then it's value when they come back again sometimes.
It's value in between.
Yeah, there's just a lot of tokens and aristocrat, life gain, life drain, and it's like, oh, this is like the big life is a resource type deck.
Yeah, my thing for Orzhov is I don't particularly love Orzhov, but Orzhov is not wronged me personally too many times. So I'm kind of left where it's just in the middle. This is my it's okay guild. I have nothing wrong with it, but I have never built an Orzhov deck. I've seen some interesting commanders. I just can't get myself to do it. I've literally, in my entire life, never built an Orzhov deck.
I'm very surprised because both of us are in this boat and we're Mardu and Abzan kind of like mains. Yeah. So it's kind of weird that Orzhov's like not that high on our list. But it is fun. It has a lot of good pieces in the middle of it, and it is fun to like drain people and then like take that back. And it's just really fun to get that engine going at times.
The downside of Orzhov is sometimes it goes from, spinning your wheels and making tokens to, ooh, you're taxing me a little too much. Orzhov is also the tax color, so whenever you cast a spell, you lose some number of life, or I'm going to gain life, or your creature's undertapped, like extort triggers. So sometimes it can get a little bit sloggy, where they feel a little stacksy sometimes, even if they're not playing like
Hard stacks.
hard stacks.
But there are some fun commanders in here. My favorite is Brina the Demagogue. I think this is cool because it masquerades as like a group hug deck, and instead it's like, okay, this can be Voltron and also value, and it hits for a lot, and people usually don't realize until it's too late.
Card actually slaps. I haven't been able to convince my opponents that this thing needs to die. And I think that's just a feature of Brina, either being good and sneaky or just so confusing to read that no one bothers.
It's just a good commander, though. I think that it's very kind of flies under the radar, and I do like it a lot.
I like Shadrick's Silver Quill as my favorite, which I think is a testament to why I have never built an Orzhov deck. I think Shadrick's is pretty cool, I guess. I like the way that you can give away resources, but it's always the best for you. I just don't really know what this deck, like, I love the commander. I think it's really, really cool. I think playing it would be fun. I just don't know what this deck would look like. Maybe other choices.
Also, I'm not sure if this factors in, but are you staying like one dragon of the Strixhaven type per like person? So if you already have Bellatrix.
Oh, this is a pod, or I'm building one of each?
Like, are you only going to build one of them because you're like, ooh, I've already done one dragon.
No, I don't have that. I'm not that particular. I'm particular, but I'm not that particular. Okay, let's get into our least fun. I'm going to go with Teysa Karlov. She's the most popular, but again, this, for me, is another testament to how little Orzhov affects my daily life. Teysa's fine. I think the gameplay can be repetitive sometimes. You know, seeing Blood Artist for 5 games in a row might not be the most fun. It's like a little stale, but I can play against it all day. It's fine.
I think my least favorite is Lyesa, Shroud of Dusk. I think this is okay in the 99, but this is also like a testament to like the Campbells of the world. Those are very sit back and I'm going to do nothing, and eventually you guys will be dead and I will have won. And I think that is just kind of an unfun play pattern.
I don't mind when it's a little more aggressive.
Yeah.
When it's like I'm bashing you, or I have auras, or I've got evasive creatures in my deck. But when it's like Lisa, pass, okay, untap, draw, land, pass. It's like, okay, how long are we going to be here?
Yeah, I think that it can really encourage unfun play patterns.
Okay, we're on to number 4. The number 4 guild is what, Mia?
It is Gruul, full of big, stompy boys and, just ramping things out real fast and trying to overrun your opponents as fast as possible.
Some people might be surprised to see Gruul up this high. I think this is a factor of, like, Gruul doesn't really do anything wrong. I kind of only have kind of nice things to say about Gruul. I don't think it's the best in the world, but I do think it's just kind of good and fun, and I have no real problems with Gruul other than a few minor, like, very specific cards.
I feel like I can never get a Gruul deck for me to stick, but that's not out of hatred of the guild itself or what it does. I just haven't found the thing that is better at doing the thing than like decks I already have, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I've had a lot of Gruul decks go through my head. I love Svella. It's one of my favorite decks. But I've also seen a lot of other Gruul commanders, and I think there's a lot of cool stuff you could do. Roxanne looks really, really fun as well.
That might be my go-to.
Faldorn even, just like Gruul is not only big boys these days. You could also play this Spin Your Wheels Gruul deck, and that's partially thanks to some of the only red card draw we have, which is the Impulse draw.
Yeah, I do like spinning my wheels, so it could be an interesting strategy to go. Yeah, you could either make a creature really, really big. Those are like your Xenaghost decks, for instance, or you can just get a very wide board like Beezy's Svella deck.
Yeah, or play like Landfall, make a bunch of tokens when stuff enters. That's definitely, I think Landfall is very, very much mostly Gruul, and then it's like partially Simic. There's like 5 really annoying Simic Landfall cards.
Unfortunately, with Gruul, I think one of the biggest downfalls is the fact that it folds to board wipes worse than every other guild, I'd say.
Pretty much. Gruul and Simic are the ones that hurt the most after a board wipe, and it's not like you're dead after 1. Every deck can handle a board wipe or recover from 1, but sometimes when there's 2 or even 3, I think some Gruul decks kind of just die in the water.
I feel like that just Simic recovers from those a little bit easier, and if there is one board wipe, Gruul players, if it's like late enough in the game, Gruul players are kind of just out at that point.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it's a deck building thing. But we also have my favorite commander, Svella. I already mentioned it. It's very fun. It lets you build up this gigantic thing and then spin the wheel so that you're casting something random and big, but it's just totally unpredictable, and I love it.
My favorite is Vrondis. I had this deck for a bit, and it was on a budget. It was super cool being able to play the dice rolling ones, and then also making tokens, and also it's just like a pretty wacky strategy. But I do have a lot of token making decks, and this seemed too similar.
That deck played a ton of garbage. That was like
it was so much fun.
Minor effect, roll a die, and then you're like, okay, great, I'll make a 5/4 now. It's pretty cool to have that. Our least fun by a mile. This was one of the blemishes on the entire guild, which is only a recent card. Itali Primer Conqueror is just kind of farts. I think this is a farts commander. I don't enjoy playing against it. One of my least enjoyable commanders, I think, ever. I still will play against it, but I will definitely heavily target the Itali player.
I think if it was cast from your hand, it would have been fine, or just cast in general, just not ETB. Come on, guys.
Why is it so repeatable? Why can this deck... This is another deck like AC where it can just only be ramp, and you can just play Itali and win with your opponent's cards. Howling Abomination is another one I put as like a kind of an underdog annoying card, because this deck plays off like a... It looks wonky, but really you can never kill Blanca or the Howling Abomination, so you just kind of die. And if you fire off a lucky spell, or you fire off a nice targeted removal spell like a Soul Shatter that doesn't target but still removes it, they're dead. They can't play the game.
I have been killed by a few Blanca decks, and it is very strong. And, you know, I guess props to that, but I do admit that it can get unfun pretty quickly.
But we get to move into a guild that Mia loves very, very much, so I'll let Mia introduce it.
I love Rakdos a lot. I think there is just a lot to do with it, and most people think of Sacrifice, which is fair. There's a lot of value in Rakdos Sakdos, but there is, I feel, a large assortment of strategies. There's like a loss of life type deal, like with OG Rakdos. There's Sacrifice, like with my deck, Mahadi. There's Madness, like with Anya. There's Casting from Exile, like Prosper. I think there's a lot that this guild can do well.
Rakdos has matured a little bit. It's not just Sacrifice now. I think Jund, honestly, is hurting more than Rakdos in terms of identity, but Rakdos has a little bit of things to do, and you do love Rakdos. I think it overlaps with Orzhov a tiny bit in my head, but I do think Rakdos is the more enjoyable one and the more fun one. And I also want to say that Rakdos is the perfect example of a guild where both colors come together and do something new, but it's not outside of what the colors do. It's so perfect. Simic Landfall. It's just green landfall cards with other blue cards in the deck. But Rakdos Sacrifice is like, I've got a bunch of red creatures that die into other things, or I can make a bunch of goblins. And I have a bunch of black cards that say when my creatures die, I do things. And then I have sack outlets, and it's perfect.
It feels very cohesive. Rakdos feels like the sixth color.
It feels like another color, yeah.
Yeah, it feels like it knows what it wants to do. And just in this deck, these decks overall, I think that they're very like targeted, and there's a lot of support for them. Also, there's just also like the option of giving people bad stuff, which is pretty funny.
Oh, like the Blim comedic genius kind of deal. How many? There's probably a couple like forced donate kind of cards.
Yeah, or there's the ones that take your stuff. There's the Fevered Suspicion, for instance.
Oh yeah, the black red sort of sub theme of like stealing cards.
I think that's funny.
There's definitely a Grixis identity of that, but I think a lot of that comes from black red.
Yeah, so I think that that's another offshoot where it's like you can go that way, but it doesn't really interrupt the whole like Rakdos theme in general.
Rakdos is one of those colors though that is very, very heavy on removal. There's no shortage of Rakdos board wipes or spot removal spells, so if you go too far into that, you know, there are downsides to Rakdos. I think that can be kind of non-enjoyable for the table. And again, if you're going to play a deck with Blood Artist and some other cards in it, if I'm just going to notice Blood Artist over and over, that might get repetitive.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that sometimes people feel bad if there's too many like Fleshbag Marauder type effects at the table because they can't really get anything to stick, and removal is super heavy and plentiful in here.
Oh, you know what? We can't talk about Rakdos without talking about probably the most annoying thing Rakdos can do is holding people hostage, having instant speed activated abilities that can virtually deal damage to players, but not having to use them. So players are forced to sit there and like kind of play as though they could win, but in reality, they can never win the game. It is a pretty frustrating play pattern sometimes.
It's the gun to the head.
There's nothing we can really do about it because I'm not going to, like, Mayhem Devil is not a bannable card. It's not a card I'm going to rule 0 out of the format and say, you can't play Mayhem Devil, because if I say that, Mayhem Devil, gone, sure. What about some crappy card now that just says when a creature dies, like Hissing Iguana? Am I going to ban that? Because all these cards are just kind of okay, but in the deck, when it's humming and doing its thing, they can hold you hostage.
That's just like with every deck, though. I feel like every guild has a way to make people held hostage.
Not as much as Rakdos.
This is just the gun to the head of life, I feel.
I don't even know what that means, and I think we're going to move to our most fun commanders. Mine is Carter Doomscourge, forcing combat, kind of a wonky thing, not many commanders that do this, and so I guess it's a Rakdos type ability, but it like takes advantage of the goading, and then it also kind of has like a sacrifice in the background, because if you attack with a bunch of creatures and then sacrifice them in combat, you get to drain people.
Carter is really fun. I think the only problem is with this is the problem with all Go decks, which is just 1v1. It's tough.
Gotta figure it out. Yeah, and then Xancha Sleeper Agent was yours?
Yeah, I think this is a very fun card, just giving it to a random opponent and then people being able to pay to draw a card and have them lose life. I think that's a very cool and funny play pattern that you just don't really get in a lot of the other guilds.
Yeah, those two are similar. How about your least fun?
My least favorite is Anya Falconwrath. I had this deck a long time ago, and it just played like Solitaire, and I don't think that's very fun for the table.
It kind of feels like Anya Falconwrath is a deck that doesn't have 100 cards in it. It really has like 40 spells, maybe even 30 spells, because a lot of it's just crappy madness spells that you're happy to cycle through. But it does take up time in the game, especially when there's a payoff in play. Like whenever you discard a card, do this. Now it's discard, do the thing, untap trigger on the stack, discard a card, do the thing. Okay, untap trigger on the stack again. I'll resolve the first one. I'll discard a madness card, trigger, draw a card, untap Anya. It's like, okay, please.
It feels like Solitaire. It
it's a
feels
lot.
like, hold on, guys, I can win. Just give me like 5 minutes.
It's like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want you to win, and I don't want to give you 5 minutes. Mine was Rowan. I don't have a ton of problems with Rowan. I just think it's a very all or nothing commander. Either you're going to fire off Torment of Hailfire on turn 3 and kill everybody, or you're going to have Rowan die and look at all the bad cards in your hand.
It was rough. I had this deck. It was so all or nothing, which is why I took it apart. I just can't really play in that play style.
All right, number 2, the runner-up for most fun guild, Izzet. Izzet is the Spellslinger home. I love spinning my wheels, so it's probably no secret that I love Izzet. Even though I'm mostly an Abzan player, the other two colors, they have something for me, and it's spinning my wheels.
I have been brought over to the Izzet side by BZ because he built me a Zephi deck, and it's really fun. I do like being able to fire off a bunch of little spells and getting value from them, and I think just taking actions is what makes the game pretty enjoyable, and so long as it's not solitaire, as we mentioned earlier, it can be really, really just fun in general.
Yeah, Izzet's primary thing is probably going to be Spellslinger. That's going to be the vast majority, half of his decks, something like that. But there's also some other stuff. You wrote down like coin flips, which I kind of forgot about.
I think coin flips and dice rolling overall is like, I'm not gonna say a sub theme of Izzet, but maybe like the fourth most played.
It's a hobby, you know. Izzet's career is
dabbles.
spellslinging, but its hobby is
it dabbles in chance-based luck, and I think that's very funny.
They gamble.
Yeah.
Basically, they're gambling.
I think that's amazing. I think that's hilarious. I'm not going to find Krark's Thumb in like a different guild for the most part. It's usually going to be in like an Izzet.
You know what? That is a correct statement. It also, as of late, has developed like a dragons theme in blue-red specifically, and like a pirate theme, and I think those are cool to have those types in these Kindred decks for like Izzet specifically. I know dragons is teamer and there's also red-green, but blue-red is becoming very real and possible.
I definitely think this type of archetype has legs, but I think that Izzet also is the most likely to combo off at any given point where it's like, oh, you're dead? No, actually, I just win.
Yeah, the biggest problem with Izzet is the oops, I won board state, where you assemble this nonsense Rube Goldberg machine and it actually works really well, and now you have infinite mana, and that might be a little bit of a bummer. Or the other opposite is you know what combo you're going for, but you don't know if you can pull it off. But you know that you have 6 cantrips and 5 rituals in your hand, and it's going to take 5 minutes to figure out whether the answer is yes, in which case people can reshuffle, or no, in which case people feel a little cheated, like you wasted a little bit of their time.
Slinging spells is fun, but slinging too many can really slow down the game and also just makes people pretty frustrated.
Sling responsibly. I also think that Izzet is the color combination I think of most when I think of like extra turn spells. That can bog things down a bit because you're like, they're instant and sorcery, so they synergize the most with Izzet naturally. But like copying a time stretch, I'm out. You're not. I'm done. You won. I don't care what you do.
And some commanders in Izzet, I feel like Izzet is the second most like guild where it's like these are the commanders you have to kill right now. Like Azorius takes number 1 with like Grand Arbiter and that sort. But with the Krarkashimas, the Niv Mizzets, those are the must kills and I think that's also just kind of unfun play patterns.
Demir has a lot of that too. My most fun, I put Brutaclad. I think Brutaclad is so weird, so out there, but it does also lend itself to like this blue-red artifacts, which is also a theme that blue-red has. Blue-red it's got a deep repertoire of archetypes. It's not just Spellslinger, kids.
My favorite is Yusri Fortune's Flame. I love the Izzet Gamblers. I think that's so funny.
Izzet gambling? Yes, it is actually.
So I think that this is a great commander to have at the head of that archetype, and it makes the game very fun.
How about your least fun?
My least fun is Stella Lee Wildcard. This is the commander that just came out in the precons. I think that this combos way too easily, and I think it is just kind of just I win, basically.
I think you haven't played against it and you don't really want to. right? That's where we're at.
I don't really want to play against this.
Yeah, honorable mention probably to Niv Mizzet Perun, who does go infinite with a certain number of cards, so you have to be cognizant of that the whole time. But I wrote the Locust God. Locust God has a lot of like pseudo infinites or game over type combos where like playing a Locust draws you a card, which makes you a Locust, and I can repeat this and stop when I want and attack you with 60 Locusts and win. I don't think I've ever looked at a Locust deck and went, that's really cool.
Yeah, I have Locust God in the 99 of my card draw deck.
It's cool at 99.
It's good, but I can see how this gets out of hand as a commander.
But that brings us to our number one guild. Me and Mia overlap a little bit in this. This is exactly what either of us wants to be doing in Magic. It's Golgari. It's green-black. It's all about recursion in some way, getting something or other back from the graveyard, casting it multiple times, getting value. And Mia's one of her favorite things to do is to kill stuff and to ramp. And this is the colors for that.
It just has a little bit of everything. It recovers after board wipes. It gets a bunch of stuff on the field. It gets you powered out a little bit faster. There is interaction. I feel like this is the all-around mid-rangey deck guild, and that's what BZ and I love to play.
Yeah, if you love mid-range value and just twiddling your thumbs by killing things and presenting your own threats slowly, like this is the guild for you. It uses a graveyard as a second hand a lot of times, and I just find this play pattern extremely satisfying, and it will never get old.
Wow, really? The carryover player likes the Golgari play pattern?
I have tossed around so many black-green commander decks, you have no idea.
Oh, I know. I hear about
I've like Skullbriar, Beladros, Ishkana. I've talked a lot about Honest Rutstein Umore, which is a deck that I haven't built, but keep talking about.
We did pull an Honest Rutstein recently, so the option is there.
Yeah, the option is there. What are some of your favorite commanders?
My favorite is Lathril, Blade of the Elves. I started on Elf Ball, and this has a sweet home in my heart, but I didn't want to just go mono green because I do like playing a lot of interaction. So Lathril as a Golgari commander is really fun to me.
Plus, there were a cool, a decent number of black elves that you couldn't play in mono green. You're like, oh, but I missed out on this card. It's really cool. And then Lathril ties it all together, and it kind of works out pretty well. Mine is all of them. I haven't really seen too many green-black commanders that I don't like. And I just enjoy so many of them. I'm going to put Ishkana as my favorite, but that could change. That is totally up to change. But I do love Delirium. I love putting milling to get some sort of tangible value. Like, oh, when you have Delirium with Traverse Evenwald, you get an extra tutor value, or you get 3 Spiders with Reach.
There's a reason why the Golgari lands are the only ones that are fully out at our house.
We don't have any of those. How about your least fun Golgari? Because even the perfect guild has some flaws.
I don't like Chatterfang there. I mentioned this in an earlier video, but I really don't like Chatterfang. This is just stop playing it.
What can we at least get something you don't like about it?
God, it's just I feel like it's just do anything, make a squirrel.
There's too many squirrels.
There's too many squirrels. I don't like squirrels to begin with outside of Magic, and then it's just do anything, get a squirrel. Oh, wait, I can kill squirrels, get more squirrels. It's just too much. You don't have to work for it.
Mine is a Gitrog monster. I do like the Gitrog monster a lot, but there's just I think maybe this card itself should just be tweaked a little bit, or could have been tweaked, because they could have really long discard steps where they go, I have 9 cards in my hand, discard 2 of them. They're lands, draw 2, discard 2 more lands, draw 2, discard 2 more lands, draw 2, discard Dakmor Salvage, how long do you got? How long do you want to be here? And it's just something about the card wasn't balanced for that, so it could get really slow and kind of annoying.
I don't think I've ever seen a Gitrog deck without the Dakmor Salvage combo.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to do. It's just so, Gitrog, you're the only Golgari commander that I don't love with all of my heart. Maybe some of the weirdo ones from 2004, but Golgari coming out on top. I want to know what your favorite guilds are, and I want to know what your least favorite guilds are. Did we rank Dimir properly? I think we did.
Let us know in the comments below, and if you want to see something else specifically picked just for you, check it out right here.